Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Well, we've got another pistol video for you here today, and we're going to be taking a look at the CSX by Smith & Wesson. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Isn't this kind of late to the game? Didn't we already do this with the SIG 938? Or didn't we already do this with the Kimber Micro 9? Well, possibly, you might be correct. And there may be some other models, of course, that are in the whole single-action, hammer-fired 1911 style compact pistol. But is it possible the CSX does some things better? Is it possibly an improvement over maybe some of these previous versions? Well, we're going to try and answer those questions and a lot more in just a minute. Alright, once again, welcome back. Thanks again for being with us. If this is your first time coming to the channel, or if you've been watching our videos and you just haven't had a chance to do so already, and you like our content, please consider subscribing. You can locate that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your computer screen there, or if you're on a mobile device, you can scroll down below the video and you can hit subscribe that way. It's a really simple thing that helps us out a whole lot, and we really appreciate it. So, Smith & Wesson CSX. A lot of people put out a lot of criticism whenever I even was asking about this pistol when it first came out, because it seems to be the common complaint is that this is just late to the game. They've already got this, and why even talk about it? Well, we're going to get into some of those details here in just a minute, but we always like to start off with of course, our customary size comparison. So using some of the ones that we've talked about that came before, I've got the Sig Sauer P938 here, and if you'll lay these side by side, you'll see that overall they're very similar in size, except when you get to the grip. There's an obvious difference in the grip size on the Smith & Wesson, but there's a reason for that. We're going to get to that in a minute. But just looking at their thickness, their overall dimensions, aside from that grip, they're both very, very small, very, very similar packages. The Kimber Micro 9, of course, is another version that's been out for a long time. And the Micro 9 has actually got a little bit bigger grip. It's a little bit closer in size to the CSX. This particular version, I've got a couple of these Micro 9s, and this has been one of my favorite, this one here. And they've been making these for a while, but this is the KHX. I just kind of like the slide designs and the grip and everything on it. But the big advantage that we're going to be talking about in a minute has a lot to do with this grip size. And we'll get to that in just 1 minute. But if you look here, once again, very similar in a lot of ways. Very similar. You'll see that even the thickness, it's a little bit thicker on the Smith & Wesson, but not by a whole lot. Very, very similar in size. And of course, the main reason that we do this size comparison, obviously the consideration here is going to be for concealed carry. Being the popular single action hammer fired versions like this that came before it, most people are familiar with those platforms. They give you a pretty good idea what it's going to be like to carry it. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get into the features now, but before we do, of course, we want to take a moment to thank our friends over at Don's Weaponry for providing us this beautiful example of the CSX by Smith & Wesson. Don's Weaponry is a huge supporter of firearms safety and education, and we can't thank them enough. So, we're going to take this the way we normally do as far as how we look at the features. Let me remove the magazine here and show you that we are safe and clear. You can see all the way through. There's nothing in there. There's nothing in the chamber. And of course, our magazine was empty when we removed it. So, we're going to start from the top here and work our way down. So, looking at the firearm, you can see you've got your sights. And this is a standard white dot metal sight. Nothing fancy. I actually don't have any issue with a good white dot sight. You know, they show up very well in most conditions. If it's really dark, it's not a bad idea to have some kind of glow sight, but I don't think it's really any kind of a deal breaker. If it's that dark, you can't see what you're shooting at anyway, so that's a matter of personal opinion. Across the slide here, and of course the slide is stainless steel, and they've got what the Armornite finish that Smith & Wesson has. It's a very corrosion resistant, it's a pretty tough finish. They've got that same Armornite finish on the barrel. And these serrations are actually pretty decent. They're pretty deep. So if you were doing this with bare hands or with gloves, it's really, really good feeling on the slide to be able to go back. Now this is a hammer fired, as we mentioned, single action. It's a 1911 style. It's obviously not 1911. You don't have a grip safety. But it's 1911 style pistol. And so you have to have the hammer cocked before it will fire. You'll notice here, this is your safety, which is ambidextrous. And unlike a lot of guns, you can actually rack the slide on the CSX while the safety is engaged. And you may think, well, why would I want to do that? Well, you know, some people, they might want their magazine inside, and, you know, there's nothing in the chamber. They get ready to take the gun with them. Safety's already on. They can rack the slide chamber around, and then the whole time the gun is, you know, in the cocked and locked configuration. So there's some, you know, utility to that. We'll take this down and we'll move on to the next part here. You can see this is your slide release. And when you go to disassemble the firearm, you see that there's a little notch. Look very closely. There's that smaller notch right there, just to the other side of where your slide catches. Basically, all you do is move this right over the top of the round area there. When you come to the other side here, see that little pin? All you gotta do is just put a punch or something inside there, and this will push completely out like you see on a lot of guns. And then the slide just comes right off, and of course it's going to disassemble like anything you're used to. You've got your barrel and spring will come out, and of course that gives you access to clean all your main components of your firearm, so it's pretty easy as far as that goes. Trigger guard, all these little micro 1911 style pistols I have, they all have kind of a small trigger guard. This isn't too bad. I feel like I can get my finger in here pretty well. It's kind of the same thing when I'm messing with these others. You know, it's not a huge trigger guard, but I think it's adequate. It's comfortable. You got your magazine release here, and it's in a, you know, pretty good place. It's low profile. You definitely have to get your, you know, thumb on it and get some good pressure on it. So I'm not sure if you're holding the firearm like this, you know, I mean, I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to you'll have to make a point when you manipulate it to get your thumb on top to get that to come out that way. So we're at the magazines, and this is a good point for us to talk about one of the differences between this firearm and its predecessors. And that would be, we mentioned, you know, your 938, for example, is coming before. Nice gun. I love the 938. But that 6-round plus 1 capacity is not as good, obviously, as a 10-round plus 1 capacity. So these magazines, you've probably seen this a lot. The kind of trend with these micro compacts is they're not exactly double stack. They kind of start off that way and then they taper, so they can get a lot of extra rounds in here without making the grip that much wider. So they've done a good job of exceeding the 938. It's the same thing with the Kimber. I've got this little Kimber here, and you know, 6 or 7 rounds, depending on extended magazine or regular magazine. Still, 10 rounds beats that all day long. Well, they've actually taken it a step further, because you get this 10-round magazine, and let me show you how it feels, basically how it looks and feels. I've mentioned before that I don't have an objection to a 2-finger grip as long as it's a good solid feeling 2-finger grip, and that's what you get here. But the other magazine they give you, which doesn't add, if you look at it, it doesn't add hardly anything to the length. You get a 12-rounder. So when you put this 12-round on, adding just a tiny bit, you can actually get your pinky on there now. And I've got pretty big hands. So if you've got larger hands and you're concerned about whether you can actually do it, I've got pretty good sized hands, and yes, you can. So the 12 rounder is definitely the way that I'm going to go. You've got good texturing on the front, on the palm swell here. It's a really nice, feels really good. And of course, the back strap you can actually change out. You have a additional smaller one here. They give you a little tool to pop it out. When you have the magazine out, there's a detent right there. You can just take the tool and you can pop it and that'll come right out if you want to change it. But it's a nice little set of features. The trigger we'll talk more about in the range section, but it does have a very consistent braking trigger, and we'll get to that detail in just a minute. But that's your basic overview of the features. It's a lot like the ones that came before it, but as you can see, it's definitely got some advantages by design. Okay, so how about the range performance? Well, talk about a few things first. We were going to mention the trigger on this firearm. Using my scale, I got varying results on the trigger, anywhere from about 4.5 pounds up to like 4.8 pounds. So just to be safe, we'll just say it's about 4.5 pounds is what it feels like, pretty consistently. When you go to manipulate the trigger on this thing, so we'll cock the firearm here, and if you watch, you've got this little, you see this little small safety you have on the front of the trigger there. You hit that, and there's really very little room. See how I'm already hitting resistance right here? So there's really no take up at all, and then you push through. And it's a nice, very nice, clean break. And then we reset, we rack our slide here. Now when I go to release this, you can hear that reset. And then of course you can hit the fire again, reset. Now as I come out, I've heard some people complain that they feel a little bit of resistance before the actual reset when they're firing it, and they're failing to reset the trigger and the gun's not firing. Well, I gotta kind of put that complaint down, because just because you feel a little resistance there, it's not actually making any noise. You can actually hear that trigger reset. So if you get used to it, the way it feels, it's pretty obvious. And yes, when you're firing it, you won't necessarily hear this in the noise, but you'll definitely know that it's kind of two different things going on. You can feel it release, but you can even feel that click in your finger. So to me, I didn't have any problem at all distinguishing between the tension that you feel on the trigger versus the actual reset on the trigger. So for me, that's not a problem at all. So obviously, for purposes of the range, I'm definitely all about the 12 rounder here. Good size magazine for training. The firearm is not picky at all as far as ammo. And really, for me, I hear people with horror stories all the time, but I just don't have a lot of firearms that have been any time manufactured recently that have any real issues. So, using the PMC, the S&B, I buy a lot of these. These are really good, range ammo. It's hard to go wrong with the, 115 grain FMJ. And if you've got a couple different varieties of that, it's always good. And like these are both 115 grain. As far as defensive rounds, I have been for a long time a fan of the VEEK round, the SIG. I've never had any problem. I know some people don't like them, and that's obviously okay. People have different preferences. I've had really good luck and really good accuracy with these, and that's why I use them a lot. And then of course the Hornady, I've got some of the 135 grain critical duty. This is good too. And then of course these are 115, just like the practice rounds. That's another reason why I like these, is because the SIG defensive ammo, it's the same bullet basically that I'm using, aside from it being a hollow point versus an FMJ. It's the same bullet, so to me the shooting is all about the same, and I like to practice the same way that I would actually have to use the firearm. But no pickiness as far as ammo goes. The firearm feels very, very solid in your hand. Like I said, I definitely recommend the 12-round magazine for a good, positive grip. 2 fingers is great, but having that pinky on there makes it a whole lot nicer. And you've got just enough of a contour in here that you can get a good two-handed grip on the firearm. Of course, you got this nice beaver tail right here to keep your hand safely out of the way. You don't have to worry about getting railroaded by this thing. So it's a good firearm for a nice two-handed grip. It's good for a single-handed grip, but it feels very solid. And of course, it's got enough heft to it when you're firing the 115 or even the 130 grain rounds through this thing. It doesn't really bother me, not near as much as some other smaller pistols. So it shoots a bit more like a larger pistol than it really is. I mentioned the trigger. For me, the reset is great, and so the results you get are very predictable. I think they've done a pretty good job with the trigger on this. So if I had to weigh this against the Kimber or the 938, my 938 has got an incredible trigger. So I'd be lying if I said that it was better than my 938, because the 938 is just such a great shooting pistol for me. But it's very, very good, and I can at least say that it's equal to it. What's it like to carry the CSX as a concealed carry weapon? Well, there's lots of ways that you can do that. When I get down to a gun this size, in my mind, I'm automatically thinking about 2 things. And remember, this is my preference. So when I talk about how I carry, there's lots of ways you can carry. I have a crossbreed, holster, a full-size leather and Kydex in the waistband, dual clip holster for this that works very well. But most of the time I don't carry guns like this that way, because it seems like it's a whole lot of holster, which creates a whole lot of extra discomfort for me for a tiny gun. And so what I'll end up doing a lot of times is I'll take a gun like this, and I'll get something like this DeSantis gun hide. I really like these. And I'll go right in the pocket, because this gun is small enough, it can go right in my front pocket, and this design will keep it straight up and down. It doesn't rock back and forth. I've done this in dress slacks that I wear every day. I can do it in jeans. I don't really do this in shorts. If I'm going to do something like this, I'll tend to maybe go with something smaller altogether, like a 5-shot revolver if I'm getting down that small. But as long as I got a decent sized pocket, I can do something like this. And a lot of people, they're not a fan of not having really solid retention, and that might be against something like a sticky. But this is also extremely comfortable if you carry it in a sticky. You can put this inside the waistband and cinch it up, and it's not going anywhere. It's small enough and it's light enough that your belt pressure in the waistband is going to hold that thing right there. And I like being able to, adjust the cant when I get in and out of the car, and feel like I've got something right there handy where I can get to it. For me, based on the size, I would actually probably end up spending more time carrying this in the pocket than I would anything, because it's small enough that as long as I'm wearing pants, it can go right in there. Now, having said that, there's lots of good options. I mentioned like the crossbreed and some of the others. Really anything that has a good shell. I know a lot of people, they're very much into some kind of hard retention, and you're not wrong if you want that. It's different for everybody. I don't necessarily have to have that, because I like to carry either in the pocket, and there's this particular place in the waistband I don't mind carrying, as long as it's a small gun. I won't carry a heavy gun without some kind of hard retention, but a light gun I will, depends on what it is. But no matter how you decide to carry it, it's very lightweight. It's a lot thinner than you would think, because even though it's a little bit wider than your 938 and your Micro 9, it's such a small amount that you can't, I wasn't even really to tell the difference, because I'm using this, it's almost the exact same holster for both of them. So the comfort level is really high. And the reason I'm emphasizing that so much, when you're looking for a concealed carry weapon, you got to remember, you want it accurate and you want it reliable, but comfort is so important, because no matter how cool the pistol is or what the features are, if you can't comfortably carry it, you're going to leave it at home and it's not doing you any good. So high scores for comfort, and I really enjoyed carrying this. Overall impressions of the Smith & Wesson CSX. Well, as I said, in the beginning, a lot of people gave me pushback on this, because, after all, they've already got the 938, and you've got the Kimber Micro, and you've got some other offerings out there that are, already single action, hammer fired, micro style pistols like this. And, it's not like it really brings anything new, but that's not really true. As we said, I love my 938, don't get me wrong. But for this being not that much bigger of a firearm, a little bigger grip, I've got twice the capacity. Well, to me, that's something worth noting. And I'm not even a person that really cares that much about capacity. I routinely will carry a 5-shot revolver, just because my hope, and anyone who carries hope, should be they never need that firearm. And if that's the case, then I would think that 5 rounds would be more than adequate. If not, I'm probably in more trouble than I'm going to get out of anyway. So, not a big deal. But it's the same thing with the Kimber. And the Kimber is a lot more, it's closer in size in a lot of ways to this one. And, you're adding, once again, double the capacity. Well, then the other complaint was, the cost. You're looking at something like the CSX. It has a MSRP of around $610. And of course, the way gun prices are. That can certainly vary based on availability and how bad somebody wants something. But I paid more than that when I bought my 938. I bought it when it was new, and with the wooden grips and the SIG light sights, I paid a bit more than what the Smith cost. Well, same thing with this little, Kimber here. The KHX model with these grips and the fiber optic sights was not a cheap offering. It was definitely more money than this. Does that mean those two are better guns than this? I don't think so. If I had my choice, I wouldn't mind having an upgraded sight on the CSX. I do like having something, either fiber optic or some kind of a glow component, but it's not a deal breaker for me. But it is a big deal that this firearm has twice the capacity of the others without really making the gun that much bigger. I think that they've done a really good job of like a lot of the new micro compacts that you see, they've got a lot of capacity inside a small area. It's got a good trigger that is smooth and repeatable, and it has the feel of a larger firearm when you shoot it. So, the learning curve of picking this firearm up and comfortably shooting it, it's really nice. You got a lot of really nice features inside the firearm. And like I said, it's also interesting that, you can rack the slide while the safety's on. That may not matter to some people, but I think it's an interesting feature, and I'm glad that it's on there. Overall, I think that Smith has done a really good job. The fit and finish, the finishes they put on the firearm to make it corrosion resistant and to make it last, I think it functions well, and I think over time it's going to show to be a good firearm and a good value. So if you've been thinking about it, it's worth taking a look, because for the money, it's not a bad offering at all. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today, and once again, we really appreciate you being with us today. We're going to be back very soon with another video for you. So as always, until that time, everybody be safe and have a great day. Thank you.